Hey everybody, this is Steve Thomas. Before we jump into today's episode, Chris and I just wanted to take a minute to acknowledge that this is our 200th episode of doing this. We never thought this would go on quite this long, so we'd just like to thank everybody for listening, especially those of you who've been listening for a while. So thanks again, and let's get on with the show.
It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogside Network, the show where we look at the dollars and cents of the sports, media, business, industrial complex on ice. How you doing today, Steve?
Oh, I'm doing just fine out here in Texas. I'm tired of the weather, but we're doing all right. How about you?
Oh, not bad, not bad. I'm back in the homeland of the DMV. Spent a week of college tours, and
I'm
now
sick. I'm sick and tired of freezing cold weather in the 50s. That's what I'm afraid.
I share your sentiment, but we're talking in the teens usually, or 20s.
It's just like I've always said. If I have to wear long pants to anywhere but work, that's a serious problem, and I really don't appreciate having to wear jeans.
I we were out last night and I saw three people that just still wouldn't give up their shorts in 27-degree weather.
That would be me. If I used to live, as you know, I've lived in many cold weather climates, but I've found that I'm just not used to it anymore. I can't do it anymore. I don't want to do it anymore. I don't even own a winter jacket. My only jacket I really own is my beloved Redskins jacket that I intentionally wear to irritate people, which I mean goes against my character to intentionally irritate people.
Oh yeah, real
it's
counterfactual
off.
there.
It's off brand.
Ay, ay, ay. Oh, we got some good stories to talk about this week, so we'll jump right into it. I was a little bit shocked when I saw this next story, which I think actually has some interesting implications in all of sports, which we can probably touch on. But after the upcoming 2025 Major League Baseball season, a divorce is happening between ESPN and Major League Baseball, as both sides, which is a little bit of a misnomer here, if we can maybe get into, have opted out of their television broadcast contract, and they will be parting ways with a relationship that has been in place since I graduated from high school in 1990.
Yeah, so I think this is a mutual divorce and probably name only.
Yeah.
You know, it's in that it was announced by both parties, but one very reluctantly. And this has been all over, but the story we have in front of us is from Front Office Sports shrinking platform. MLB and ESPN to split after 35 years by Eric Fisher, and this was instantly on the Front Office Sports newsletter thing that we're plugging for free, here every week. So the point here is that Major League Baseball and ESPN have had a broadcast relationship for a long time, since 1990, and they're in the middle of a 7-year, $550 million contract, which was set to run through 2028. Well, the parties have agreed to mutually opt out, which basically means mutually terminate this agreement without any damages being paid by one party to the other at the end of 2025. I didn't see this coming at all.
No way.
This seems like it was totally, out of nowhere. And so basically what's going on here is that ESPN is objecting to how much of the fee they have to pay Major League Baseball here. It says particularly in light of the rights deals they just did with Apple and with Roku. But MLB basically is giving them a finger in this. This is the non-mutual part here. The quote from Rob Manfred, who's the commissioner of the Major League Baseball, says, "Given the strength of our product, we do not believe a reduction in fees is warranted." And there's a better quote in here too, and I'll find it. But Chris, your thoughts?
Well, I think what the interesting part is that this really was as much, well, obviously it's about the money. So, but there's caveat one, but it really felt like Major League Baseball was most annoyed here with ESPN in terms of like the relationship. They talk about shrinking platform. That's obviously not the platform of ESPN shrinking. That's about how much content ESPN was dedicating to Major League Baseball outside of the broadcast of the games. And it was just whether, and this is on their TV, on ESPN Plus, all over the places that ESPN has channels and places for content. They were just getting a smaller and smaller piece of that pie. That means the weekly shows, the amount of commentators, the amount of journalists they're paying, the amount of articles that are going up, the amount they show up on Sports Center. They just don't. They feel like all ESPN was doing was basically the bare minimum, which was broadcasting the games and not much else to promote.
Well, yeah, I mean, and ESPN has a tendency in their coverage to pimp the sports. They're not an even distributor of sports news. They tend a tendency to pimp the sports of which they broadcast the most first, I would say, realistically. And yeah, that is what it is here. There's a couple more quotes. Um, this is Manfred again. He said the league has not been pleased with the minimal coverage Major League Baseball receives on ESPN outside of live game coverage. Even casual viewers would certainly be able to notice the difference between compared to how the network approaches the NFL and the NBA. But so they use the term linear distribution in this thing. So it says Manfred took aim at the network's linear distribution, which has fallen to 53.6 million homes, roughly half the level of 2011. And he says to that end, he said, quote, we do not think it's beneficial for us to accept a smaller deal to remain on a shrinking platform, which is like a direct jab at ESPN. So I think what linear distribution, means, I think they're talking about essentially cable TV, the number of homes this is broadcast to in traditional cable TV. I think that's what that means. They don't really define it, but they're talking about falling linear distribution falling to 53.6 million homes. I think he's carving out streaming platforms and stuff and just saying, look, it's not being broadcast as much into as many homes. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Right. And so, but he's not being totally genuous here by saying, he's talking about a smaller deal to remain on a shrinking platform when the nature of broadcast television is changing. That's more of just kind of a jab at ESPN than it is an acknowledgement of reality. Because the reality is that it will soon be. It may not now, but if you project into the future, even a couple years, ESPN's going to be readily available to a much larger group of people if they can convince people to subscribe to their big streaming thing that they're talking about.
And really, the marquee thing on ESPN was Sunday Night Baseball, which is an exclusive only game, no competition, one game happening, and then having at least one series in the playoffs. So, but which means you're not going to get, because we've talked about many times, you can, because of the basically contracts that ESPN, well, really Disney has with NHL and NBA, it means that those games are on the menu on Hulu, on Disney, and every night, because they're basically broadcasting every night. And so maybe if something isn't on ESPN proper, which is the linear distribution, you can go on all these streaming services and get those games. Well, if they only have one Major League Baseball game on, so it's not like you're not clicking in on Tuesday or Wednesday to Hulu and saying, oh, there's a baseball game, let me hit play on that, like you are right now with NHL and NBA. And then the playoffs is a little bit different anyway. So you're not getting that. So I think part of it is you're only getting one game on any kind of, regular season game anywhere, which means you're not getting that. They're not getting that drip of games on across all of Disney's platforms on a daily, weekly basis, like they're getting with the NBA and NHL. So, it means that the awareness is much lower, and it means that really the only place to broadcast it is on linear. I'm sure you could probably get that baseball game, but it's only one. So, but the thing that's interesting to me is there's no, because now, and Major League Baseball is going to have to, well, after 2025, go and sell whatever that version of that package is, right? Between now and the next time the MLB media rights are up, which I think is only 3 or 4 years from now. They're not going to get that money. They're not going to get, no one's paying what ESPN would have paid for the next 3 years of Sunday Night
I think it
Baseball
is
and
overpriced. I don't
playoffs.
think they're wrong about it.
Yeah. They're not going to recoup that same check.
Yeah, because it isn't. The truth is, it isn't a lot. They have only been broadcasting ESPN Sunday Night Baseball, for years and years and years, and the TNT had multiple games a week for basketball, as did ESPN, and I don't think it's a lot. And I have always wondered why they don't why Major League Baseball and ESPN didn't agree to provide a greater scope of coverage of Major League Baseball. It has made me legitimately wonder, and I don't know why they're paying 550 million for this for one game a week. It doesn't make any sense to me. And yeah, it looks like the playoffs wrap up into this. And ESPN looks like the wild card. They have the wild card round this season. Seems like they've had different rounds in the past, maybe, but this front office sports column says they have the wild card round this season. I don't know.
Those wild card games are like Wednesday afternoon at 3, right? These are not even like,
yeah, this is basically the play-in game to the real playoffs is what we're talking about here. I don't think I would want to pay this if I were ESPN. I would want more games. I also don't know. Does Major League Baseball really have to sell this package? They need to look at a wider scope. They don't need to just have some provider do Sunday Night Baseball. They need to find their own TNT where somebody's going to broadcast games on a national level when there's no football on. They ought to have Saturday and Sunday games on network TV. They ought to find a partner to do that. When there's no football on, and major basketball games are typically at night. There's a ton of baseball games on in the afternoon. They could have a regular Saturday and Sunday presence in the spring and summer, on network TV that they haven't had in forever.
The game of the week model doesn't really work in baseball. You have 180 games.
That's my point. It's like it's not a special game. It's not ESPN Sunday Night Football, for example, or they typically highlight important games, important teams. It's a highlight thing. Sunday Night Baseball is just a game. How long has it been since you've watched Sunday Night Baseball for anybody but your team?
Yeah, it's not a thing. It's not like it's not, and the game of the week, but there's another 10 games the next day.
It's not an important highlight game. It's not like they've got the Yankees and the Dodgers or whatever, or the Yankees and the Red Sox or and so if it were me, I would look for a serious broadcast partner. Maybe it's not ABC, but pick one, CBS, Fox, something, and have ESPN's Saturday and Sunday baseball, or network Saturday and Sunday baseball coverage every week.
If you think about why ESPN, to use your parlance, Steve, pimps the other sports on a daily basis, whether that's Stephen A. Smith,
because they paid a truckload. That's why.
Well, it's also because they have a game on every night. You're not gonna spend all week talking about a Sunday night baseball game. You know what I mean? You're gonna spend you're gonna have all your talking heads talk about Bucks Celtics, which is going to be on at 7:30 that night. So I mean, we live in a 24-hour news culture. You're not going to have Tuesday talking heads content about a baseball game coming up on Sunday.
Well, because even NBA games are more important on a daily basis than Major League Baseball.
There's
games.
Only 80 of them.
Yeah, or 82, I think. But yeah. Right. That's less than half. It's about almost exactly half, actually. But that's what I think Major League Baseball needs to look at it. And I think, some of this looks like, I wouldn't say hurt feelings because it's business, but these are people that are irritated with each other, and I'd love to have been in the back room to see how exactly this happened. But I think ultimately this will be better for Major League Baseball if they can turn around and sell their product to the right vendor or the right broadcast partner to have more games, or maybe not. You don't own Saturday and Sunday. Maybe you have the model that basketball has every single night. Somewhere we broadcast a baseball game. Yeah, maybe that's it. They're too wrapped up in local rights. This is the problem with baseball generally. Um, basketball is not basketball is structured the same. The local teams sell their rights, but somehow it's not a local regional sport. It's a national sport in part because of the broadcast partners. Major League Baseball has shot themselves in their own foot by sort of embracing this local rights thing and this we're a regional sports thing. They need to break out of that if they want, and if they want to really kind of graduate to the next level and become a national sport. And the best way to do that is less run to NBC.
An interesting way to do if I do it a series of the week. Let's say like imagine if you were just featuring a series over a week every
Have
week,
all 7 games between
or
the
whatever,
Cubs and
three
the yeah
right regular season. I'm just saying, like, yeah, what would be like, let's say Cubs Braves are
three or
going to
four
play a
games.
4 game series
Yeah.
this week. Feature that for the week. Then you can meter out the conversation. Then you do build a little bit of excitement. It is a little bit of an already in baseball culture. The series is more important than an individual game, even in the regular season context.
Well, yeah, and if you look at the size and scope of the number of games, 3 games is about the equivalent to one
Yeah,
NBA
that's
game
true.
in terms
Yeah,
of importance. And how does baseball teams frequently measure success in, they've won 5 series in a row,
yeah, totally.
and so
Series of the week is actually a great idea.
that is a decent
There you
idea.
go.
We need to copyright that. Remind me to
The
do that.
Hogseye broadcast series, MLB series of the week.
Exactly. I don't think we'd agree on the team. You and I just root for different teams, but yeah, I think we need to copyright that. I'm going to work on that. No, that
Um,
is an absolutely great idea. But it seems like Major League Baseball just cannot get out of its own way with this regional mindset.
which is killing them all over the place.
It is. It's because they already have a problem, with the the shortened attention spans of youth today as it is because of the phones and because of other cultural things. Baseball's already a hard sell for people who aren't playing it because it's not as in the moment exciting as other sports. Basketball, slam dunks, constantly moving up and down the court. They already have a problem. They don't need to make it worse by refusing to broadcast. I love this idea. You just came up with a great thing. And I'm going to steal credit for it by putting the copyright in the hog size name, of course. But that is a wonderful idea. But I don't know if Rob Manfred's the wrong person, if he's too married to it. They really need to have someone who's more of a visionary thinker here.
And they're probably feeling themselves a little bit because we've talked about a number of times in the last like 18 months that baseball's actually had some rebounds in certain things, ratings, attendance, things have actually been pretty good in baseball, upward trend. So I think they got a little bit too big in their britches here a little bit. They probably just sort of trying to make ESPN happy just to keep this contract for the next, I think it is 3 years. But the funniest thing, well, one thing I want to say before I say a funny thing, is that we've been talking about for years that ESPN is going to have to start making some critical decisions about what they spend their live broadcasting rights on. And this looks to me to be one of those times where they said, we've got to scale back, or we got to pick we got to pick our champions, and they had the out and they bounced.
The rare moment when sanity reigned at ESPN, because we've been talking for years on this show about how they've just wasted money by the truckload on all kinds of rights for just ridiculously large contracts. It's kind of odd that this is the hill they chose to die on. After all the things they spend money on, Major League Baseball is what they chose to stand up against. It's
The
just kind
funny
of
thing
fun.
here, before we move on, is that in multiple articles I read, they kept talking about the home run derby as this like crown jewel of the
No,
package.
it's not.
Which I'm like, okay, it's fun, but like this idea that that's somehow like how could ESPN give up the home run derby? I'm like, give me a break.
I don't think as many people care about the home run derby as they used to. I think it's gone
No,
down in cultural importance.
and even when it was, it's not. It's a 3 hour event in a very long Major League Baseball season.
They kind of do it in a dumb way. They it sounds more interesting than it actually is.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
So we'll see. This will be we'll be talking about this again because they're gonna sell these. They'll find a new buyer for these rights, or they'll add the package. They'll add it to the existing package.
The question is, are they going to do it in a smart way, or are they just going to sell one game a week on Sunday night to some cable streaming service?
I
That's the
wouldn't be surprised
question.
if they just top off Apple or somebody, or maybe or one of their other broadcast partners, and they just pick it up. But all the articles also say don't count ESPN out when they Major League Baseball negotiates their full package here in I think just 3 or 4 years.
Well, this front office sports column mentioned that, that we said too. Because, I mean, baseball isn't going to want to just top off Apple. This is a lot of money.
Yeah,
They're going to want to sell a package. So I don't think they're just going to top off Apple or whatever. They're going to want this sport to be broadcast on a regular basis on something that's in every home. Pick your platform. It's not just going to be some streaming thing that they're going to want. And whether they're going to get it done, who knows? But that's what they're going to want.
well, speaking of ratings, ESPN and All Star events, we are recording this on Saturday morning, just I think 2 days after the culmination of the Four Nations tournament, which was basically the NHL's version of their All Star game. This year, they built All Star teams in Finland, Sweden, Canada, and the United States, and had a small week long tournament. And that tournament ended with a overtime 3-2 victory by Canada over the United States. It ended up being a little bit more exciting, even at the beginning, than people thought, and was already kind of like drawing buzz. But then for that game, it became the highest rated NHL game. It was still just on ESPN, not on broadcast, with I think an over 9.4 million audience since Nielsen changed their way they did ratings in 1994. It was eclipsed by a couple of Olympic hockey gold medal matches, but NHL game. And what I find even a little bit more interesting ultimately is it was the most bet on hockey game of all time. Now that's a short runway of legal betting, but still that does tell you a lot about the interest and excitement for the game.
Hey, look, we all know what's the most important thing nowadays.
Yeah, right.
Betting is, I mean, it
Our
is.
best metric.
Yeah. This seems to be, I think the most culturally prominent hockey event has been in the United States in a very, very, very long time. And I'm not a huge hockey fan, and so for me, it kind of came a little bit out of nowhere. And then all of a sudden, the U.S. has beat the 51st state, in this hockey tournament, and it was a cultural thing. And the Canadians, booed the U.S. and the U.S. booed the Canadians, and it ended up being fun. The president got involved, and you know, without getting political about it, we're not a political show, but he talked to the team, and it became a thing. Um, I don't know how the I don't know how I'm a bit confused, I guess, as to how it came out of nowhere. Is it just because of nationalism, or is this truly a moment in which hockey has become a prominent sport in the United States? I tend to think it's more nationalism than anything else, because I don't know if there's evidence to suggest that hockey's prominence has risen overall too much. And by the way, the rating story I forgot to mention that we found kind of at the last minute here, that was the one of the best ones, was from something called the Irish Star. Canada victory over USA, most watched NHL game ever as ESPN Sportsnet smash ratings by Jeremy Goldstein, dated February 21st. But that's the most interesting thing to me, is we were talking about cultural prominence for Major League Baseball. Well, this came out a bit out of nowhere for me. And I think it's just rooted in nationalism. Everybody wants to root for their team, for their country more than anything else. Kind of like the
I think
Olympics.
that I think that's part of it for sure. I think it was a brilliant move by the NHL to to experiment and try something like this. I think it's a couple things. Well, one, just sports events get audience when there's real stakes and the players are trying hard. And that was clear from even when they announced the teams, actually, and the pride of the players who got picked for their team. The buzz was building and the players cared. Nobody wants to watch a sporting event where the players don't care. And the players, you could tell that from the first puck drop. The players cared about these games. They were playing hard. There was guys playing in the USA Canadian final that wouldn't have been playing. They would have been too injured to play their regular NHL game. Now, this caused us some other problems, but that shows you this meant something. And hockey is the most international sport. And I know other sports are more debatable about where people come from. It's the one sport where their players care the most about representing their country. For
I don't
whatever
know.
reason,
Soccer is pretty big, man.
I'm talking Big Four.
Oh, okay.
So in an American context, it's the one where those players actually care. I think it's because the Olympics has been big, either play, and before the NHL was in the Olympics and before Soviet bloc players were in the NHL, that created buzz for decades, right? Because you actually got to see these players play against each other. So it's the players care the most. And I think that comes through. Now, obviously, the nationalism and some of the other stuff swirling around it, but this is a huge boon for NBC and because of the Olympics next year and the NHL players returning. But the NHL was actually overt in naming their strategy. They wanted this kind of almost truncated pseudo international tournament as basically your appetizer for the NHL players returning next winter. So for them, it was also one, you take the break at around the same time of the year so that you start to get that into your schedule. And you actually, think about what if the US faces Canada in the gold medal game, which by the way was the last huge rated hockey game, was 2010 US versus Canada. So we already have history there. If you get a repeat of this game with essentially the same players, it'll be massive.
Yeah. Now let's contrast this event with the NBA's ridiculous in-season tournament, which nobody seems to care about very much.
Yeah.
The Lakers won the tournament, the last time one they had, and then they didn't even make the playoffs. And it's no different. All it is just same basketball games, the same teams called something different. But this one, they've tapped into nationalism, and it is a preview of the Olympics. And I love the point you made about, the Russian players, as people forget, Russian. It's only been in the past 20 years or so that Russian players have been allowed to,
probably 30, but yeah,
maybe more.
Thing.
But it used to be that it was the Russian Olympic hockey team was a bunch of elite pros that nobody ever heard of in the United States, and they were dominant in the sport, but nobody ever heard of them, and so there was sort of an anti-communist thing going on.
Also Czechoslovakia and stuff. You can actually even widen that circle out the time to the other Eastern Bloc countries, which have big some of the best players of NHL history are Czechoslovakian and things like that.
Yeah. But obviously NHL got this idea from Major League Baseball. Yeah, because the Major League Baseball thing has been a success and it has been a cultural event. And people have watched it and it's got ratings for that. I forget even when they do it. Is it
they do it before the season, right? Don't they do it
that's right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Early spring or whatever.
Yeah, like I was about to say March or April or something. But that has been a success. And so clearly major hockey's been good at coming up with like short events that help them, but it doesn't seem to boost the ratings for the season too much. Like they have their winter classic thing they do. and when they play this game outside and it becomes a TV event. So I don't know how we get it. They get it to translate to typical in-season ratings, increased ratings and excitement, because it doesn't seem to translate. So I think that's the next step. Is anybody going to care about the rest of the National Hockey League season, or are we done with hockey now until the Olympics?
I think at this level for sure. I mean, and with them, I mean, their numbers
I don't
have
even
ticked up
really
a
mean
little
at
bit.
this level. I mean, is it going to result in a boost at all?
It's what's the new floor? Does it
Yes,
raise the floor? That
right.
because it's
That's what
not
I'm
going to be.
asking.
Yeah, we'll
It's not
see.
going to. They're not going to be the NFL. Nobody thinks that.
No,
But
no, no.
can they grow the sport? Can they get more people interested in it? Can they have a sustained climb in ratings for nationally televised games?
Yeah, that'll be super interesting to see. I think they will probably see some level of uptick. But who knows? It's the fourth most popular sport. I mean, there's no doubt about that, and that's why they have to be opportunistic. They have to take bigger swings. But I think what's interesting to me, if you look across the big four, and I love your comment about the World Baseball Tournament. It's all-star games are dead. They're stupid. I think that what we saw with the NBA and actually the NFL, which even all the stupid flag football and the Manning brothers and the skills competition, their rating that did not work. Their
If the
the
players
all-star
don't care,
games,
why should we care?
right. And so you have to figure if they're you got to have to take your all stars and give them a reason to care, or just make it a dog and poke, which is I think what I kind of respect about the NFL.
They've
They
given
don't
up the
really
idea of pretending it's
right.
legit. Yeah.
So make it a goof, and if the rate no one if their ratings tick down, who cares, right? But so you honor the players, you do something goofy, and you move on with your life because. And football's a little harder because it's really hard to do football
Kick
halftime.
people injured,
Right. And
for an
what's a
all
left,
star game.
if you're a left guard, you play one way or not at all. So it's harder than the other sports for
Well, you know what
sure.
the NFL thing has reminds me of? What, 15, 20 years ago, there was that, it was like an ABC Worldwide Sports,
Yeah.
thing where they would have,
45 years ago, Steve, but yes.
was it that long ago? It
Yeah.
can't be that long ago. um, for those who don't remember, it was during the off season, they would bring quarterbacks and stuff in and do these dumb games, who can throw the ball through the hoop, who's the fastest, who's the this and that. And it was just fun to watch and not a serious competition. And yes, I think um, the NFL has woken up to the fact that everybody laughed at the Pro Bowl and never took it serious. I have not watched a Pro Bowl in a long, 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 long time, and neither has anybody. But this sort of skills competition thing, at least, is semi interesting. Whereas the NBA is dumb and just hasn't figured it out at all. In this, Shaq's team versus whoever it was, Kevin Hart's team or whatever it
I
was,
paid zero attention
because the
outside of the
players don't.
aftermath.
Yeah, me neither. The players don't care, and so we don't care. Whereas everybody cared about this hockey thing. It was like a mini Olympics. They tapped into that same Olympics, vibe. It
Which,
really is.
and they're all ripping off the soccer and, the World Cup type of mentality. But
Well, in baseball,
yeah, what I find interesting is that baseball and NHL have figured out new ways to feature their stars
yes.
outside of the construct of an all-star game in quotes. So you of course want to put your best players in new and interesting situations that have stake. Um, and that's where NFL doesn't really care. So I kind of give them a bit of an exemption, but the NBA is struggling mightily with figuring out how to put their stars in new situations that have stakes that make the players and then thus the fans care.
Now, I think, and this may be a political thing, Chris. I'm not trying to be that. So I kind of get your right, because I'm a conservative. Chris is not a conservative. That's not news. I think people like me are tired of NBA stars because they're so out front. Um, they don't believe in typically what I would say I believe in necessarily, and they've irritated me. Whereas these hockey guys, I don't know what they believe, but I do know they're nationalistic and they root for their country. Whereas it seems like these NBA guys are don't care at all. And so it may be like people on the right, I think, pay less attention to basketball now than they used to, whereas hockey has kind of tapped into everybody. I don't know. What do you think? Because you're not on my side of this cultural aisle.
I think the political beliefs of NBA players I spend no time thinking about. Um,
I
I
would try
think
to, but they make it so known that I can't avoid it.
I don't know. I mean, outside of LeBron, who's that vocal? Name it. Who's an outspoken,
Steve
outspoken NBA
Kerr,
player other than who?
Steve Kerr.
Well, he's a coach, so
I know, but he's still prominent. What's the guy from the Spurs? There's a number of them, and they all irritate. I'm just telling you, from people who are on my side of the aisle, the NBA generally irritates people because of them being more outspoken than other athletes about political beliefs, and I think it hurts their viewership.
I think that's a flavor of a bigger problem, which is the elitism and sort of untouchableness of NBA players for a variety of reasons, right? Like, so whether it's their political beliefs, whether it's load management, whether it's I'm leaving this team, because I'm mad about something. I think there's a certain detachment, which is strange because there's the smallest team size. You get, they have the least amount of equipment on. So you get, sometimes it's like, so their in your faceness of it for a variety of reasons, I think is just turning people off.
Yeah, I think
And the
that's
NBA
fair.
is stupid. So I mean, you can pick your reason within that bouquet, but I think it's all kind of symptoms of the same issue. They're not connecting with people. We can talk about ratings, we can talk about this. And so these players that, what was it, Kevin Durant that said, which at least, hey, at least he was being honest. He said something along the lines of, we don't care. This is a week for us to come together and celebrate the game and be together and hang out, So, and so if you don't care, this is a relatively new phenomenon, even though they didn't play defense in the past. Guys like Allen Iverson, Kobe, Michael Jordan, they cared, right?
Larry
It
Bird.
was different. Yeah, this is different. So, but
That's what I think you said a better way to say what I was trying to say. Because it's not just all about politics. It's not R versus D. It's I don't know. It's cultural elitism. Maybe these NBA players just act like they utterly don't. They're above the fray, and that irritates a lot of people. Whereas excuse me, NFL players, even elite NFL players, nobody cares about the political beliefs of NFL players for the most part, and every once in a while somebody will do something outlandish, but they've managed to keep in the good graces of American culture, in a way that NBA players just haven't. And I think this hockey tournament thing was a way for hockey players to do that. I couldn't name one political belief of one single hockey player at all, ever. Even like, I don't know what Wayne Gretzky believes on anything,
oh,
or
he's
pick one.
massive MAGA.
Is he? I don't know. I have no idea, nor do I really
He is.
care. Yeah.
In fact, the funny part about this is pertaining to Gretzky in this particular story is he enraged Canada by
Oh, did
showing
he
up at the
really?
game in a USA jersey.
Oh, he did.
Yeah.
Even though he's Canadian.
There's all kind, that, and that's neither MAGA well, a little bit, but anyway, I mean, just on that,
My
so
point
that
is,
became a
like,
story.
not that I'm a Mr. Mag or anything, but I didn't know that about him. And it's not a prominent thing about him, but instead what it became is an opportunity for everybody to wave their respective flags. Canadians wave their flags, Americans wave their flags. We laughed at them, they laughed at us. And it was a success. Whereas the NBA just has cannot relate to um middle American culture in any way, because the players themselves don't care. They don't. They act like they don't. They act
Yeah,
like it's all
that's
about
the key.
money.
that's the key. I think that's that, and that's starting to really show, right? Like the sort of the underwear is showing underneath the suit on that, and
Yes.
that's the problem. That's the problem, and you can define that problem a bunch of ways. Before we move on to the next story, I do want to update everybody here, including us. The show is called The Superstars, and it was a televised sporting event featuring top athletes from 10 different sports competing in events that were not their own. It debuted, Steve, get ready,
Oh no.
take your Geritol. It debuted in 1973.
Oh my God. That's before my time. So
I
when
was
did
only
it
a year
end?
old.
When did it end?
It 2003.
Okay, so I'm not wrong then. So when I saw it, it was not 45 years ago. Okay. Don't age me, man. Okay.
The most interesting factoid about this was that the show was developed by famous figure skater and more famous figure skater commentator Dick Buttons.
Really?
Yeah,
That's who came up with this?
yeah,
I just
that's
remember one of
hysterical.
those. There was another thing that ABC did where they would bring athletes in from a bunch of other sports to compete on it
Yeah,
and
this was
stuff.
it. This was
That was it.
yeah,
Okay.
10, 10 athletes from 10 different sports
Okay.
as every episode.
Because I remember they had Carl Lewis on one of
Yeah,
those.
yeah, they have Olympic
Like they wouldn't
stars.
let him do the sprints because that's just not fair. But he ran in this like a mile long race where it was a mile
That's a
distance.
long time for a sprinter.
Well, yeah, because I remember he got way, 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 way out ahead, and then he just totally, just completely collapsed and died and won by like 5 feet. At the end of it all, because he just utterly wasn't ready for it. But I want to say there was some subset of that thing where they brought in NFL players to do like
They
passing
probably did
competitions and stuff.
specialized ones once
Yeah,
the show
right. But
became
that's
famous.
fun. That's fun to watch.
Yeah.
That's my point. That's really fun to watch.
And then its cousin that came after through that was Battle of the Network Stars, which is the exact same thing but with TV stars.
And I think people care much less about that.
I don't know. People
They're
love
not
Battle of the Network
athletes.
Stars.
They're not
I know, but
athletes.
that's
Who
actually made it
cares?
funnier. Um, so there we go. I think one thing as we go to our next story here that I think we can pretty much guarantee is going to be on the table for the next NBA All Star game is USA versus the world.
Oh
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that
That's for sure.
which I
That's
still don't think
coming.
the players will care.
No, it'll be the same thing. It'll be everybody waving their flags.
But would the players care?
Yes, I think they care about this thing.
Yeah, but at least they're on their own country. Like maybe the USA players care a little bit more.
Well,
But
okay. So
like
your point is
if it's a
it going to
mutt
be
team of
Team World? You
Slovenia,
mean?
yeah, I mean that's going to be made up of what, 7 countries: France, Slovenia.
Maybe, yeah, maybe. So the U.S. will care, and that's all. In
Yeah,
terms of the U.S. market, that's what's most important.
right, and that's why they'll try it for sure. But I don't know if the players will be out there giving it their blood, sweat, and tears.
No, the U.S. players will do that.
Maybe. Yeah. So anyway, they're gonna have to fix the NBA All-Star game, which even 10 or 12 years ago was still a bit of a cultural
They
event.
need to
This is a
fix
relatively recent phenomenon.
They need to fix the NBA period. They have a
Right.
bigger
This is
issue.
Yeah, it's a symptom, not the disease. So next story is, of course, the disease, the symptoms, the cure, the whole enchilada, the NFL, in some stories about that are relatively recent shift by Netflix. The Netflix, they want to be involved in your traditional Sunday afternoon NFL package. And considering that we've got an opt out here by the NFL and their current media deal, I think coming up in 2029. So not that far off ultimately in the grand scheme of things. And I think it's the biggest lock in sports business that the NFL will opt out of their media contract the second they are eligible to opt out. If Netflix comes in and says, we're going to buy up a Sunday package, we're in a whole new ball game, and we're going to see numbers like you can't even believe, which is
I think
already numbers we can't believe.
I don't think we have a direct story on this to give.
No, we had a front office
Did we
sports
have
one.
it? Oh
Yeah,
yeah. Um,
but it was
was
everywhere too.
Yeah, it was ever here, and I'll try to sit here and find it. But so I do think that the world would embrace NFL on Netflix. And the reason I do is it's a very easy way for everybody to get whatever game they want. Within reason. I don't know if that means that Netflix is going to have the same. I don't think Netflix will have the same traditional model of we're going to only broadcast one game and make you watch it in your market.
Well, the NFL might make them.
Maybe, but it's not. People have VPNs, man.
Yeah.
The only way they could block it's one thing to say your local broadcast channels can only broadcast this game. It's another thing to make Netflix block off games by IP address location, which is the only way they could do it. And so I think, and if the NFL was smart, what they might do is give Netflix a few games a week, a few Sunday games, and have them broadcast all of them. They don't need to have the entire contract, but give them pick a number, of 3 or 4 prominent games and broadcast them all at the same time and let people watch them. Let's modify the current model. Because I do think people would like to select their games in a easier way than they have now.
That very much could be the case. There's a couple of things I think are interesting here. One, the fact that just at the end of last year, like around the holiday time, Netflix, Ted Sarandos said, we're our interest in sport, which we've talked about. Our interest in sports is event based television.
Yes.
Whether it's so the what do they do? The Black Friday games? No, that's Amazon. They did the Christmas Day games, right? So that's event based television. So that they're this is so
look at
that
the
was
hockey
what
thing.
December.
It's an event.
Yeah, but from December to February, where they're talking about wanting a regular, sustained package of games that people rely on a weekly basis, is a total shift in their strategic thinking about where their interest is. And then to your point about does this mean more of an a la carte menu type of approach? Obviously, them saying, hey, we want Sundays puts the networks right in their crosshairs. But the
Yes.
more interesting battle actually might be YouTube, who currently has that direct TV pay per, package. And that might set up a battle because YouTube would fight that. They would fight that tooth and nail because that's their business model, is the old direct TV package. So if Netflix wanted to do some kind of a la carte choice, adaptation of the Sunday package, that puts YouTube and Netflix in a direct clash.
Maybe my perspective is slightly different and not wide enough to recognize it because it didn't even really occur to me about YouTube. When you brought the story up, because I don't do YouTube TV. I don't know anybody who does YouTube TV. It doesn't seem nearly everybody. Don't ask me a percent, but most people, and I would argue, nearly all middle class households have Netflix. Not nearly that many have YouTube. It doesn't seem to me to be nearly as prominent in the cultural landscape as is Netflix. Maybe I'm wrong, and that's just my perspective on it. It would seem to me that if Netflix had a regular slate of games, that's a world apart and a big step up from YouTube TV. But again, that's just my perspective. So I don't know, Chris, you may have a different one.
Well, you don't have to have YouTube TV to buy the NFL package. Like I have the NFL package, but I don't subscribe to YouTube TV. So they are separate.
Right. But you have
products.
to subscribe to it separately. Whereas Netflix,
It would just come
everybody
with your subscription.
Yeah. Everybody has Netflix, whereas you really have to be a major NFL fan to pay the $350 or $400 a season or a week, or not a week, but like a month or whatever it is. It's a lot. And Netflix is dramatically more accessible. And so I think Netflix having a slate of games is a world apart from YouTube having the slate of games for that reason. And so, and again, I also think it's technically much more difficult for Netflix to force a particular game down on a market as is regular network TV, because there's not a local broadcast partner available to do it. So you're locked into IP addresses, and that becomes technically harder, and it's easily defeated. We have idiots on the comment section who we've banned a million times who keep changing their IP address to come back in. And, you have to chase the beast with those people. And so I think Netflix is a different story. And I think it's a way for the NFL to fundamentally alter how people watch football.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I'm just pitting who I think, and well, Google has deeper pockets, so that's one thing. But I just
I'm
think it's
not
who the
disagreeing with
battle
you.
would be. I just
I'm
think
not
where the
disagreeing with
battle
you.
is. Yeah. The fascinating thing about YouTube TV, which I do think is just going to replace cable here sooner than later, and that's already what they're doing. And the latest data point to me on that was, did you follow at all this old school carriage fees battle between CBS Paramount and YouTube TV?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. There's a war going on with it.
Well, they solved it. They
Did it? I
sorry,
didn't know whether
yeah,
it still got solved.
but it was the exact same thing we've seen with on cable for 40 years. That is
The
carriage
battle
fees
for people
battles.
don't know is that YouTube TV threatened to drop CBS entirely because of carriage fees. And
Yeah,
the last I saw, it hadn't been solved. You're telling me it's been solved and it worked
it
out.
has.
So
Yeah,
it was to the point where ESPN or CBS was broadcasting little scrolls at the bottom of their screens and
yeah,
contact YouTube and tell them they need to
which they
see.
would have done with Spectrum or Comcast 5 or 10 years
Yes,
ago.
absolutely.
So if you want another, if you want another data point that we're just the concept of cable, not the hardware, is just moving to YouTube or other online providers. We saw the exact same battle that providers and the carriers have had replay itself in this new digital distribution model.
I guess my point though is that Netflix having a regular Sunday package, it seems to me that their competition or their network broadcast, whereas YouTube is just not the same. YouTube is not, to me, they just don't have the same place in the landscape as do the network broadcast team. Because again, everybody has CBS and ABC and NBC.
Well,
Not every
you get those on YouTube TV.
I get it, but it's just not the same thing to me as the availability of the YouTube NFL package at $400 a year is totally different than the minimal cost Netflix or the free, or almost free networks. And the network broadcast of NFL has been an institution for decades, whereas what YouTube has taken over is the side chick of what came from DirecTV.
Yeah, I don't disagree really with any of that. It will be fascinating in 2029 when obviously the NFL is going to opt out of its
It's
current
going to
media
be a
package.
major shift in the way
Right.
sports broadcast is done
And so
because
Netflix is basically,
the NFL
yeah.
leads the pack in this.
And Netflix is signaling right now, 3 years out, 3.5 years out, that they're going to be in that ball game in a different way than we even thought 2 months ago.
Oh, and there's going to be Netflix news,
Yeah,
shows and
100%.
Netflix, election coverage and all of that. It's the only way they can
Um,
compete. They can't just compete as a movie streaming thing anymore.
no. And Google has deeper pockets, but what Netflix does have is better global reach.
Absolutely.
So you could build a whole global package there. So anyway, that's going to be fascinating. We quickly, based on this conversation, why this all matters is we are seeing some even new valuations for sports teams as now with private equity, these teams start to slice off the bottom 10 to 15% of ownership to sell to private equity. What was it? The 49. We've seen this before. I think the Eagles were 9 million. Sorry, I keep doing that. 9 billion. Recently when they played footsie with this, but now the 49ers are looking to also sell some of the bottom percentage to private equity, and they're also getting 9 billion valuations, which means
Yeah.
that's the new floor.
Yeah, just we're out of time here, so we need to go. But so quickly, CNBC Sport had the San Francisco 49ers explore 10% minority stake sale at about 9 billion valuation. And yeah, so the 49ers are selling 10% to private equity, which is what we said everybody was going to do, and lo and behold, it's happened. But the point here is that the Washington Seawords sold for 6 billion 2 years ago. And yes, it was a distressed asset, but even if you kick it up a billion, as a result of being a distressed asset, we're already at 9 billion. We're
Yeah.
already at 9 billion. And yes, the
And if Josh
49ers are
Harris said, I want to open up my bottom 5 to 10%, it would also be evaluated in that same
absolutely.
ballpark.
And part of it is he's turned around the distressed asset. Yeah, but yes, that's just the new floor. So it's we went over NHL valuations a while ago. I think we did made in the NBA valuation. I believe that the top valuation in the NBA was the Golden State Warriors at 7.4 billion, I think. Um, this is just one team. This isn't even the Dallas Cowboys. This is the 49ers. So the NFL is still king in this. But that's the takeaway here is that PI or PE private equity is here to stay, and the new floor is 9 billion. That's
Yeah,
the takeaway.
100%. All right, Steve, give us your off-season schedule.
All right. The Hawks Die is proceeds on as always during the off season. We are deep in the heart of doing our free agency preview and our draft previews, leading up to for obviously free agency and the draft. And we're going to do our regular position group breakdowns after the draft is over for Washington. So the show is broadcast every Thursday on the hawkseye.com.
Awesome. And we will see you in 2 weeks.